Hello, everybody. My guest today is Paula Bookidis. Paula is the CEO and leads Girl Scouts of Central Texas, which serves over 12,000 girls and has 10,000 plus volunteers here in the Central Texas area. We covered a lot of ground in this conversation. Prior to Paula's time with the Girl Scouts, she spent a lot of consultant in private practice. We talk about what led her to working for the Girl Scouts, including the time that she volunteered as a troop leader in her girls. She has 3 daughters and her daughters' Girl Scout troops. We cover a lot of ground here. We talk about book recommendations. We talk about her previous. We talk about women in science, technology, engineering, and math fields, STEM fields. We cover a lot of ground here. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Paula Bookidis. Thanks for agreeing to do this again.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
We've already covered a lot of ground, so we may cover the same ground twice. But like I told you before, these things, I like our conversations to just be open for them and not with any specific agenda, because that's how conversations go. Mm-hmm. So I try to not preload anything. But in doing this and preparing for it, there were a couple things I wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
One of which is, if you look at you're a prolific LinkedIn user, at least in terms of what you can see there on your profile.
Yes.
You have 13 professional credits, or like experiences in your professional life, the bulk of which are consulting.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Because right now you're nonprofit leadership. How do you go from private industry consulting through the pathway to end up where you're now?
I was a management consultant for 20 years. And so the awesome work of being a management consultant is getting to go into a new organization and learn it and be curious. That's one of my superpowers, is I am passionately curious. And
I had a question on here about your superpowers.
That's one of them.
Because you had mentioned that in the write-up.
Yeah, and I love learning new things, and consulting is an awesome place to do that.
Did you always know that, like from young Paula?
No. I don't think I really did not understand that about myself. And so I think if I had, I might have chosen different things early in my college and then early career, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just really didn't, and maybe I just wasn't mature enough, or I don't know. I've always been a good learner and a good student and that kind of thing, but I wouldn't have necessarily said curiosity drove me. Or I was learning things that I wasn't curious about and I didn't know to go try to find something else.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, consulting, the really cool thing is, you get to see how different organizations work, and kind of it helped shape for me what I felt like were core to the goodness of any organization. Mm-hmm. And then I was helping businesses improve mostly through data and analytics, and I was selling services to do that. But I really wanted a more clear line of sight to the impact it was having on humans. So I started looking around, and I had been a troop leader. And so I was already a Girl Scout troop leader. I was already invested in the mission, and I saw the goodness of the mission. And so then this, it's one of those things, this role came open, and I had sort of been looking, but was still pretty happy in my job. And long story short, I became the CEO of Girl Scouts of Central Texas. Yeah. And what the transition, because I had seen so many different businesses and how they worked, and I had been a leader in an organization, I think what I brought to Girl Scouts was that, okay, how can I understand how Girl Scouts work, and what does it mean to deliver a mission instead of a product or a service, and the levers that you pull are all still similar.
Pretty common.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you do a consulting engagement with Girl Scouts prior to being offered the job? Did you already have knowledge of the way the systems worked? And
I certainly knew it from a volunteer, frontline volunteer perspective, and I had opinions, but I really did not understand the ecosystem of Girl Scouts. And I think I was a little bit even naive in taking the job. One of the things that surprised me was how many people care about Girl Scouts, and I didn't fully appreciate what that would mean for my job. So I have a board of directors I answer to. Mm-hmm. I have 15,000 adult volunteers.
This is just for Girl Scouts of Central Texas?
Yes, actually it's more like 10,000 today, but a ton of volunteers, and a ton of volunteers who care deeply about it and want to share that. We're a membership organization, so we have delegates, so we have this whole democratic structure. And then there's also the national organization, which is we're a federated model, and so they give us our charter, our brand, our programming. And so there's a relationship there. So there's just a lot more people involved than I appreciated.
Yeah. What is something that you did not anticipate in the job prior to taking it that you would have told yourself prior to taking the job about, or given yourself a heads up about? Like, hey, you're going to probably have to deal with something that you're not prepared for. Here's what
Yeah, I think that I got a little tripped up on because of all those constituents, what it would take to make change. I was a little too fast.
Slow moving, big ship with a small rudder.
That's right.
Yeah.
And really needing to understand that I needed to get a lot of people on board and understanding why. Where I was as a consultant, one of the wonderful things about consulting was you're often hired as a change agent. They want you to come in and make change quickly. That's part of the benefit.
Where is stuff broken?
Totally. Fix it.
Right.
And so I was moving, and I stepped on a few toes early on.
Yeah, well, you're going to have a tendency to do that when you're a change maker.
Yeah.
What is so you had a desire to do something meaningful with one organization, and that's what led you from consulting into the nonprofit world. In your previous experience, you had a lot of telecom experience. How does any of that translate into your current role, or is that just like what you did prior to this business?
It just happened to be. So I worked for a small-ish consulting firm, and there was a point, I was a partner, and there was a point where we decided to be more industry focused.
Yeah.
And we looked at which of the partners had the most hours in certain businesses.
That's our business
And
model.
guess what? I had the most in telecom. But I mean, right behind that for me was healthcare and financial services, but I was the one. So telecom I took on. The thing about telecom that I think is interesting that does translate to Girl Scouts is so I was specifically working with cable companies. They are dying, right? That's a dying business model.
Very much.
And to some extent, Girl Scouts being a 110-year-old organization, we are in a time of transition and transformation. And so there are some parallels between, okay, how do you take what you do that's old and legacy and transform it? Now, I would argue that the mission of Girl Scouts is certainly more important.
Yeah.
Maybe. Well, I mean, the mission of news and information sharing from a telecom perspective is important. That's important for our world.
It just strikes you as more meaningful.
More meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there a point in your career where that became more obvious to you that you wanted to do something that had meaning behind it?
Yes. I mean, after being in the job for 20 years, I loved building teams. I loved my coworkers.
Yeah.
I loved the clients I worked with directly. But when I looked at what the clients were doing in the world, I just felt like, frankly, I just felt like I was making a small group of people richer, and that's a cynical way of looking at it.
Sure.
Even though the impact I had on the humans around me was real. And I really wanted to do something that I felt like I could more directly see the impact of making people's lives better.
You feel like that's a common path for people to take, where you do the sort of soulless for-profit thing first, and then you realize, this is just not fulfilling like it was before, and that leads somebody into wanting to make a more meaningful difference in a nonprofit? Or is that just your...
I think there are some
people.
people.
Of the same bent.
Yeah,
That's why I'm asking that.
I feel like the people in my life who I meet, there are some people who take that same energy and interest and say, I'm going to make a ton of money, and then I'm going to be a philanthropist, and I'm going to do good with my resources because this is what I'm good at, And so, I do think it is not uncommon for someone in midlife to say, what does this mean, right? I want to feel like what I'm doing is meaningful.
Sure.
But I think every company, every place everyone wants to feel meaning in their work, right? And sometimes that's harder. And there's tons of people in this country who do work that's the meaning is that it provides for our families, right? It's really about making your life work.
Right.
I think it's a privilege in some ways to say, I can change my career and do something every day that really that I feel like has deeper meaning.
Yeah, it's you have a unique position to be able to say, yes, I'm providing for my family through this job that I've chosen, but also you have a little deeper meaning to go into.
Yeah.
It's ebbed and flowed for me in starting Live Oak, in that, my meaning when we first got into this, the reason to get into it, I checked a lot of those boxes in the first 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just an independent person. I wanted to run my own thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to take something from an idea to a real thing that employed some people and they could make a living off of the thing that we created.
Yes.
And after 5 or 10 people, and you realize, like, okay, this is, it's relatively stable, probably not going to go out of business tomorrow. Once that box gets checked, you start, it's a lot like Maslow's
Yes,
hierarchy,
totally.
where you're checking these physical needs boxes and you're working your way up.
Yeah.
And I can see at the beginning of this year, we had sort of a redefining of what the meaning is to what we're doing as a leadership team. We talked about it across our leadership team. We were already growing prior to COVID.
Right.
COVID dumped gasoline on the fire,
I'm sure,
for us, and we were well positioned for it. And obviously we didn't plan for COVID. But
Right.
We were in a good spot to be able to say, hey, this isn't going to kill us, and it actually might be beneficial. Let's make some maneuvers to try to take advantage of it. But we reached a point at the end of last year, we realized we've continually grown. We've solved a lot of challenges. We've built a business that's now getting inefficient because we haven't paid attention to what it was going to look like when it was 40 people.
Yeah.
We never planned on that.
Yes.
And so now, okay, growth seems like the thing that you would obviously just say, well, yeah, we want to grow. But we had to have a much better reason behind it.
Yeah.
That's been a fun exercise.
I bet. What did y'all land on?
So it started with a discussion amongst the leadership team. So the leadership team at Live Oak is myself as CEO, Mike Alexander as COO, Kristen Scheuer, who is Director of Customer Experience. Do you know Kristen?
I saw her on I think she might have just started when we got to know y'all.
She was an L1 when she started. She was a technician.
Okay. I think she came along maybe as when y'all kind of brought the team. I think she was there.
She's great.
Yeah.
So Kristen's on that team. Hal Abramovich is on that team. He's Director of Client Service, and then Tate Hubble. So we sat together, the five of us, and we said, okay, the first question is, should we grow?
Right.
Do we want to grow?
I think that's really smart.
Because we could say we're 40 people, we have 100 and some odd clients. Let's purposefully stay that size.
Yeah.
And when somebody's the low person on the totem pole, we replace them with a better person.
Yeah.
Or if we have a new client that we really want to take on, look at the client roster and say, these bottom 5 we always have issues with, let's get rid of those.
Right.
So growth was the first question. And then it was, okay, if we're going to decide that we want to grow, I need to know what the reason is behind that. We need to collectively agree on why we're growing, and the money side of it can have very little bearing on our decision making. I want to know why beyond just, oh, well, it'd be cool to make more money doing this.
Yeah.
And across our leadership team, to a person, the response was, yes, we should grow, because if you're not growing, you're dying, was kind of the sentiment.
Yeah.
But also, this is a really good place to work.
Yeah.
For the 40 people that work here that want to be IT professionals, it's a really good spot for them to build a career. And also, we have 106, 107 clients that prior to being with Live Oak didn't have a great IT experience. So we kind of owe it to the rest of the market who are suffering with bad IT.
Yeah.
So we had good reasons to do it.
Yeah.
And then we acknowledged, for us to go from where we are today to say double, the whole thing has to change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to know going into it, we have to prepare our teams. Not everybody's going to be down for that, and that's okay.
That's a big, that 50, you get to 50 to 100. So the consulting firm I worked for, when I started, we were 30, and when I left, we were 200. And those big milestones, like the amount of process and kind of rethinking that we had to go through at 50 and 100 and 150.
30 to 200.
Yeah, but I mean, over 20 years.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and we weathered some storms. Like we were at Enron when Enron shut down.
Oh my gosh.
That was like, I had worked for the firm for 4 weeks.
You were a consultant for Enron prior to them shutting down?
Yeah. And actually what's so funny is it's one of my colleagues who was on the Associated Press picked up pushing out an Enron chair. He wasn't even an Enron employee, he was a consultant. But we all, the organization found a way to keep everyone employed through that. And that was our largest client. We had, I mean, it was like 15 of the 30 of us were billable at Enron. So anyway.
Consulting businesses, they don't quite have the, I don't know a better term than sex appeal. They don't have the sex appeal of like a consumer goods business.
Yeah.
Where you've got a brand that's on your shirt and you can sell stuff and you see people in the airport wearing your stuff. Service businesses don't have that.
Yep.
And you're not typically going to have a period of time where you grow by 800% in a year and now you can sell all this product.
Yeah.
They're slow growing.
That's right.
But ironically, given our name is Live Oak, like a live oak tree, if it grows slower, it's putting down roots first.
That's right.
And it's much more drought tolerant.
That's right. That
So,
organic growth. Like we never took on debt in the firm I worked for.
Yeah, we haven't
and
either.
so, yeah, I mean, I think that's something you can do, right?
Right.
When you're growing organically.
Yeah, it's at a point now where the majority of the boxes that I had put out to check professionally have been checked by Live Oak.
Yeah.
Now we've created some new boxes that I can't, like they're now on my list. We need to do these things
Yeah.
or I'll feel like it's a box unchecked. But thinking about the business a little differently now than we did 10 years
Yeah.
ago.
What an awesome place to be.
Yeah, it's been rewarding in a way that I did not expect to have.
Yeah.
I didn't expect was possible professionally because I
That's super
sold
cool.
copiers and printers for
I remember you
6 years.
talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, talk about in your line of work, you have the time that you're devoting to the Girl Scouts, but you also have a pretty deep experience in volunteer organizations outside of the Girl Scouts. So on your LinkedIn, you've got 6 different organizations that you volunteer time to, and I'm guessing that's a thing you expand on constantly. How do y'all look about that as an organization?
Yeah.
And how do you look at it personally?
We see ourselves as part of the ecosystem of our community, which is like, that means that we all need to participate in making the community better. Girl Scouts is a part of that. And so we strongly encourage staff to do things outside of work. I will say for me, I ebb and flow with that. I am actually in a period, it's interesting, I'm in a period where I'm contracting a little bit there. My oldest is going to be a senior in high school, and there is a lot, you're not there yet, there is a lot that comes along with that. And so I'm stepping away from a couple things and focusing my time more on my family for a little bit. So, but I mean, the beauty of volunteering is you can do that in a way that, as long as you're clear with the folks that count on you. I'm keeping a few things that I do, but I get a lot out of that. And I really do feel, one of the things I love about this job is really feeling like I'm better tied into what's happening in Austin and the community problems we have as a whole, and how Girl Scouts fits, and maybe how I or the folks I work with can help with some of those things that
Give me an
maybe
example
don't
of that.
see.
What's an example of that? Things that are going on in Austin that the Girl Scouts have a unique ability to address.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple things. One is workforce development. So we, as a community, right, we've decided we want to attract employers, right? So especially semiconductors, right? We've got the CHIPS money, the CHIPS Act, Samsung's bringing, building a new plant. Others in Austin will benefit from that money. We don't have enough people in Austin that are ready for those jobs. We see ourselves as really well positioned to help girls get and stay interested in science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yeah.
We are part of the workforce pipeline. That's one.
Cool.
Yeah.
That you've been associated with Girl Scouts since long before you started working for the organization. With your daughters, I'm guessing, were part of a troop, and
yeah,
you were
I
a
became a
volunteer.
troop leader because I had not been a Girl Scout. I was a Girl Scout for like a hot minute growing up. I don't really have, I'm sure it was formative, but I don't have a lot of memories. But my best friend from growing up, her daughter is a little older than mine, and they were in Girl Scouts, and I was watching all the stuff she was doing. I was like, wait, you're doing what? Like you're going on this like, high adventure camping trip with kayaking? Like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And then they were doing this really cool advocacy project at the school about anti-bullying. And so I sought out Girl Scouts for my kids. And I ended up becoming the troop leader for one. And as kindergartners, I had a group. I and a dad of one of the girls in our troop and another mom were three of us together, troop leaders for 5 years. And I really got to see.
This is when?
This was, this is my middle kid. She's 15. She was 5, so 10 years ago.
10 years ago. 5 years before you ever even had the opportunity to work.
Right. And so I got to see what the mission was. I learned more about the mission. Our mission is to create girls of courage, confidence, and character who make the world a better place. And that really played out in the programming that we had, access to, in our girls going to summer camp, in the community service projects that were encouraged. Every piece of Girl Scout curriculum, every badge that the girls earn that goes on their vest, it has a collaborative aspect to it where you're working as a group to be able to do something, and it has a take action component where you're applying it in your world. Now that can mean when you're little, when you're 5, your world might be your Girl Scout troop. When you're 15, that might be your state, right? And so there's just this, importance put on making a difference in the world is real. Like that, I saw all that. So as a troop leader, I saw that, and I was like, there's just a lot of goodness, and it really made a difference for my kid. I'll tell you one quick story. So I became a troop leader, and then very quickly, my daughter and I went on a camp out that was for leaders and daughters, and this was maybe 4 months in, and I didn't know this, but Girl Scouts love a talent show, and there was a talent show, and some kids had clearly come prepared, and some hadn't. And this is my daughter, who's an artist, and she's pretty shy, and she leaned over to me about an hour in and was like, "I want to tell a joke," and I was like, "Oh my God! Like, do you know a joke? Like, there's like 100 people here, and you're going to go up on stage?"
That's a bold move.
She did it. She went up. She told a little one-liner. And the crowd, goes wild. And
it crushed?
Yes. I mean, it crushed, and it was funny, but the crowd was so generous, right? There's just this sense of community. And she came off the stage with this gigantic grin on her face, and I just thought, this is what it's about. It's about community.
Yeah.
It's about creating a community. And even today, like our data shows, when we ask girls and caregivers what makes the biggest difference for girls, a caring adult and the sense of community of that more than anything else that we offer.
Seems like those two things are more important now than they were even 10 years ago.
Oh, I think so too.
However, the organizations like Girl Scouts aren't trending that direction.
Right.
Why?
That's really the question of the
It's a tough question.
moment. And I think there's the demographics of our country is changing, for sure. There are people for whom Girl Scouts and other organizations like it have always been a part of the fabric, and there are lots of people who it's not, right? And the legacy doesn't have a meaning. I think also there's so many things our kids have access to today that they didn't 10, 20 years ago. All the sports teams, all the extracurriculars, and if you're in an area that has those things. And then I also think there's families who they're struggling more than ever, right? I mean, the number of families who either are single parent families and families where both parents work, people have less time. So that dynamic has changed. And when we actually, the national organization did a study recently of girls and caregivers who aren't in Girl Scouts, and what are they looking for? And what parents want for their kids, that really hasn't changed. How they want it to happen has changed.
Right.
They still want their kids to find their voice, try new things, build confidence, build courage, but they don't really want to have to be involved because they don't have time.
Right.
So that's where we're evolving, is in those changes.
So a lot of what you all do, the programs you run, are dictated by the National Association, and then you get sort of a framework for how you want things to run, and I'm guessing you get some flexibility to create programs that are specific to your geographic area.
We're our own 501c3, so we have some autonomy, and then because of our chartering, there's only a few things they care about. Are we using the badges like we're supposed to?
Okay.
Are we using the brand like we're supposed to? And are we on their technology platforms, the common infrastructure?
Gotcha. How have the programs changed, even in your 10 years of having exposure to it? The things that Girl Scouts are teaching the constituents, the girls that are a part of the programs, have they changed over the course of the history of the organization? I know you mentioned like a focus on STEM fields, because women are underrepresented in STEM careers.
Yeah.
Has the organization changed fundamentally in placing a focus on STEM, where it may have placed a focus on traditional female professions? Or talk about that a little bit.
It definitely has. I mean, so the founder of Girl Scouts, her name is Juliet Gordon-Low, and she wanted to create an organization for girls that they got to try things that they didn't get to do otherwise. Now, in the early 1900s, that was like horseback riding. That was things that girls were excluded from. But it was also, there was an entrepreneurial aspect to it. Very early on, they decided to sell cookies to fund their camping. They wanted to be in the outdoors. The Girl Scout cookie was part of the legacy. And then, so there's a core of giving girls opportunities to things that they wouldn't otherwise have that's still there. All of the STEM curriculum, so we have 4 pillars of curriculum: STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. That was introduced in the 80s, I believe. It's the 80s. We call it life skills, which that's a lot of what Girl Scouts used to be. It's I consider it sort of adulting.
Adulting.
now. It's also got, for young kids, it's got, how to be kind to each other and how to work together.
Yeah.
There's entrepreneurship, and the cookie program is the core of the entrepreneurship piece. So there's a lot of like entrepreneurial mindset. How do you think about forecasting? All the things about a business.
Yeah.
And then the fourth is the outdoors. And the outdoors has always been part of Girl Scouts. And one of the things that's happened in introducing the STEM curriculum, which is robust. I mean, we've got coding, we've got all different kinds of science, like eco-science, environmental science. We've also tried to create, or the national organization has tried to create some crossovers there. So like in the outdoors, there's a lot of outdoors and STEM together. So that you're recognizing that STEM isn't everything we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, there's been a change.
This may be delving into topic area that we end up cutting out later, but the thing that strikes me about what we do for a living, when we put out a job description for, let's say, an L2 technician that we need to hire, the comparison of male resumes that we get versus female resumes we get, it's not comparable. I mean, it's
like
for
way more volume.
I mean, and significantly leaning male.
Yeah.
And it'd be hard to drill down to how much of that's nature, how much of it's nurture, how much of it's cultural, how much of it just happens to be the fact that, certain people are attracted to things and certain people are attracted to people. And some of that seems to be gender related, but that's sort of a touchy area of discussion in the world that we live in. Probably less so now than it was, say, 5 years ago. But how does an organization like Girl Scouts that's explicitly there, you had mentioned the mission was to prepare girls for all these things.
Yeah.
How do you navigate the nuance of the world that we live in today where that's a little more slippery of a concept than it used to be?
And Tanner, are you talking about sort of identifying like gender as a construct and wanting to focus education specifically on girls, or like I make sure I'm understanding your question?
I think that we certainly fall in the STEM category given our sort of focus on technology for businesses. And when we put out a job for a technology position, we're getting such a heavy dominated male responders to that. We have female technicians on staff that are great, and their soft skill typically is markedly higher than the guy that we get that works the same role. So there's benefits to both. But when you're deciding how to develop your own programming and what you're going to focus on, how much do you look at what a female participant in your programs might be more bent towards, just given her?
I understand your question. Totally does. And
we're dancing around a
so what the STEM girls, the first cliff where girls say I'm not interested in STEM anymore is in third grade. So by third grade, a large percentage of girls will say, I am not a science person. I am not a math person.
8, 9 years old.
Yep.
What is it about that?
So they start seeing, there's all kinds of things that affect that, but they start to be more aware socially of what's happening in the classroom. They see boys potentially being pigeonholed or given opportunities or taking opportunities in science and math. The other thing is our curriculum, our standard school curriculum focuses on the less people side of STEM and the more numbers side of STEM. And so our curriculum really is designed with girls in mind, thinking about humans. What is the human impact of what you're doing? So you talk about the soft skills, right?
Yeah.
Of course, those technicians that you're trying to hire, they're working with people to solve their IT problems. That's a big part of what they do. And so for example, one of the pieces of curriculum that's available for girls, I think it's probably second, third grade, is about flotation and buoyancy. And so traditionally that kind of curriculum would be taught about a boat. Well, recognizing that girls really love animals, the curriculum has been adapted. It's all about how do you get this elephant to float to get across, to get across to see its herd, right, as an example.
Yeah.
So it's much more focused on what are the things that girls care about. And so there is some of like leaning into those norms and understanding that that's how girls learn and what they want to learn.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing to try to reduce that cliff of girls who say, that's not for me. I'm not
Right.
interested in that.
Yeah, it's showing them the angle that the avenue of approach to a STEM career
That's right.
that might be a little more
That's
native
right.
to a girl.
That's right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think for y'all, I mean, what you're seeing in the population of people who apply for your jobs is the same thing that every technology company across the world sees, and they're trying to create more gender balance. It's hard when the population of people who want to do that job
Yeah.
is so skewed.
I would say that we have not tried to create a balance. We've tried to create an environment where it doesn't matter
Yeah.
what position, what gender you come from. If you're really good at your job,
Yeah.
we don't care.
Yeah.
And we have exceptional female staffers that do the job as well as their male counterparts, and they have some advantages that
Yeah.
their male counterparts might not have, and vice versa. And
Yeah.
it's not, obviously not all that's gender specific, but I mean, some of it seems to be tendency related. Like the soft skill that somebody like Kristen has versus the soft skill that somebody like Hal has, both of which I love, but Kristen's soft skill just natively,
Yeah.
it's like it's baked into her.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that can certainly be, it can cross gender boundaries. I think,
Certainly.
I'm curious, I mean, one of the things that I think, as now having, been in the work world for a long time, is that I've much more appreciate now at Girl Scouts than I did before, is understanding how you create a workplace that is truly where people feel like they can belong is a lot harder
Yeah.
than I used to think. Where
Why?
it was sort of it's more important in our culture now because we're trying to serve a population, right? Like in consulting, the population we were trying to serve was fairly narrow, as a certain set of executives at companies, right? This is different, and I think when I was thinking about you and your role, right? It's also important probably that you have people that are like the people, your clients, right? So like that you have people on your workforce who understand and represent the clients that you have.
Yes. And the culture that we've built is precious to us now.
Yeah.
Because of that, I mean, because it's a people business and not a technology business.
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
have to have people that want to work for each other
Yes.
to build the camaraderie. And then in our client base, we're pretty careful to filter clients that we just don't.
Yes.
You get a sense after the first couple meetings with
Yes.
a prospect
Yes.
of what their culture's made up of. And
Yes.
if we see red flags,
Yes.
we'll withdraw
I
from
loved
consideration.
those. So what are some of your red flags? I'm so curious about that.
Some of our red flags. If we talk to a client who has obvious problems in their IT environment, that they bring us in to discuss how we would solve them, and they're unwilling to acknowledge the fact that they have a problem in the first place, we're out. Because there's too much work that needs to be done to make you happy.
Yeah.
And even if we did it, you're probably not going to be happy. So we'll just let that be. A company that doesn't understand culturally, I'm talking about their own culture, doesn't understand the importance of the technology that they rely on in order to do their day-to-day job, where it's like, this stuff's been broken, we just need it to work, we need to not have to think about IT or the importance of it. Like, in order to do this well, as an outsource provider, we can know everything there is to know about an IT operation, day-to-day IT operation, but if I don't know what's going on at Girl Scouts of Central Texas, I can't plan the infrastructure to
Right.
evolve over time with what your needs are.
Yeah.
And so if we get an inkling from the leadership team of that customer that they just see technology as this necessary evil and they don't want to have anything to do with it, and they expect you to be a panacea, you have unrealistic expectations. They're not going to work well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Do you remember our first discussions together, Live Oak and Girl Scouts?
A little bit.
What do you remember?
I do remember y'all asking about our business, meaning like, what's going on at Girl Scouts? Like, how does it work, right? What do the people do?
Right.
Right? It wasn't just like, what laptops do you need and what tools do you use? It was like, what the people that we're supporting, what is the work they do? That was a differentiator.
Yeah. I
You know?
remember I remember you went through an RFP process. I remember we had talked to you prior to you deciding that you wanted to go through a
That's right.
RFP.
That's right.
And then I remember sitting in your office, I think it was you and it was Meredith, and you were talking about, hey, we're going to put this RFP together. And I said, well, let us take a look at it, and we'll tell you what gaps need to be filled.
Yeah.
And I can remember going with Mike to Denver, Colorado to go meet with some customers there.
Yeah.
And on the plane, we looked at the RFP together and we made all of our notes. So we went through the whole process and we submitted our proposal, and then we came to your office and did a presentation.
Yes.
And we rolled out a bunch of people to it. Do you remember what happened?
I think, I'm slowly remembering. Yes.
Yeah.
I think y'all were not our first choice.
We were not your first choice, which is funny
Which
because
I've totally forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Until you just said it.
I'm glad I brought it up then. And you're not the first person I've had in here who that story applies to. Tina Terrian, the first person I interviewed in this format, works for a law firm in Austin that I knew her prior to starting Live Oak. She brought us in. We went through an RFP process. They disqualified us. I don't even think we made the cut with them. But when we were talking to Girl Scouts the first time, something that made an impression on me that I want to pay you the compliment is when you all told us, hey, we're not going to move forward with you. I remember it was very thoughtful, the manner in which you and Meredith did it. And I remember you offered to do some sort of an exit interview.
Yeah.
Hey, if you would like to, we can sort of tell you what led to our decision.
Yeah.
And I had not had a circumstance like that before where somebody was so readily willing to talk to a vendor that they're not going to hire.
That's partly because of my consulting background. Like I always wanted that, and it was very hard to get. Right, like just tell us. Like I need it. It would help me so much, right?
Yeah.
In being better if I understood what you're.
I think it probably reads as needy. If I'm coming to you and saying, "Well, what was it? Was it me? What did I do?"
I think there's a way to approach it though, which is just like if you have feedback for me that could help us do this, like I will almost always give somebody that feedback.
Well, I appreciated that I didn't even have to ask for it. Because I'm the same. If we lose a deal that I felt like we were really well positioned to get that one done, I want to know what it was. Because there's probably, the nature of blind spots is you don't see it because you're blind to it. So if I have a blind spot that we're not seeing, boy, tell me about it. And you actually told us some things about the way that we had presented ourselves and the way that we had actually done the formal, giving you of the proposal.
All that now.
That when you said it, it was like, duh, we shouldn't roll 12 people into a room and add all this confusion about who does what.
Yes, I remember all that. And then it wasn't too long after that, though.
It was about 6 months.
It was 6 months?
I think so.
No, we never engaged with the other. Well, I don't know. Your memory's better than mine.
I think you had been with the other firm, and not to disparage them, but I think you had been with them for at least 3 to 4 months prior to getting that phone call.
I thought that there was a deal breaker with them in the negotiation process.
I think you had started working with them, and there were some projects that didn't go well at the very onset.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad here we are.
Here we are. We did it.
Here we are.
Yeah, it's a success story that we tell a lot, and it's not the only time it's happened. Where some of our best client relationships told us no the first time, and then the second time, and then finally, we found ourselves in a position where it worked out. And I know you're not super involved in the day-to-day of the IT relationship, nor am I. But what's been your impression thus far?
Well, I think it's been a huge game changer. We were really struggling before with all kinds of things, and there's so much maturity that we've gotten to. So the main thing for me is I just don't hear about it that much, right? And so that when I do, we're talking about the future, like what is this thing that we want to support going forward,
right?
As opposed to this thing's not working, and before there was a lot of outages and things not working and support not going well. And I just don't hear about any of that anymore.
We talk about it as a shifting of perspective, that companies that have never been able to look at the horizon and see where they're going, they're only spending their time looking at their feet. There's this point at which the customer realizes, I'm not worried about what we're going to step on tomorrow because we put the work into it.
That's right.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. So we've only got another 5 minutes before you got to hit the road, but we had started talking about books earlier and podcasts earlier. You are an avid reader, and you self-professed avid podcast listener.
Yes.
So I want to know, from a podcast perspective, what are the ones that you hit every week?
Yep.
And then on a book perspective, I want to know, what are the books that you've either revisited multiple times, like you read them over and over again,
Yeah.
or that you've recommended multiple times,
Yeah.
maybe the same book?
Yes. It's interesting. I am a very big consumer of content, podcast and book. And one of the things about that is I don't always remember the names of things. So it's terrible. I mean,
You just know you
finished
like
this book.
them.
No, but podcast wise, there's a couple things that I hit, and they're sort of different facets of life. So parenting and sort of running an organization that helps girls. There's a podcast called Ask Lisa, and it's a woman who's a psychiatrist. She's written a book called, I'm going to forget the name of the book, but I literally have it dog-eared with like underlines next to my bed about raising teenage girls. And it's all about it's so informative. Like I've used it like a guidebook. So Ask Lisa, that's one. Work-wise, there's a couple things I listen to. I listen pretty regularly to the suite of Harvard Business Review podcasts. I kind of pick and choose the content there, but they're oftentimes short. There's one called Women at Work that's all about women in the workplace that they produce that I like. There is a podcast. So I'm a little bit of a productivity geek.
Okay.
And Michael Hyatt, he has written some leadership books. He and his daughter have a podcast, which is called, I think they've just changed the name of it. They call it The Double Win. So it's succeeding at life and winning at work and succeeding at life. It's all about sort of work-life integration and productivity. That's one I regularly listen to. I listen to podcasts about books.
Okay.
So I listen to a couple. They're probably not worth mentioning, but I get a lot of book recommendations from, and they're mostly fiction. But I listen to people talk about books.
Are you like a murder mystery?
Murder mystery is sort of my popcorn. Like if I want like a easy, I don't read
sugar.
romance, but like I love like dystopian fiction. I love. I would call what I read probably more. It's not mass market fiction. It's a little more literary fiction.
Okay.
Then book-wise, so podcast-wise, I think that's. I listen to a podcast called Your College Bound Kid because I have a kid who's college bound, and oh my God, that is a whole nother rabbit hole to fall down. But I've listened. That's twice a week, and I listen to like 2 hours of college podcast content a week.
Wow.
And then books. I'm actually reading right now. Leaders Eat Last, Simon Sinek. Have you read many of Simon Sinek's books?
I know Simon Sinek, or I know of him.
Yeah, I hadn't ever read this one, and I listen to a lot of stuff. I'm listening to it. It's good. I mean,
I like it based on the title.
Yeah, it's been interesting, and it's talked some about the history of work in America too. And so he talked about the first time that there were ever mass layoffs. This really was not at all part of business until the 80s, when Reagan laid off like 10,000 air traffic controllers at one time. Anyway, it's a very interesting book, but it's a kind of people-centered leadership and how to create trust in organizations and how to think about that, and that's really good. I have a list of business books that I recommend to people a lot. So Radical Candor is one,
Okay.
Which is all about feedback. I like Brene Brown. I subscribe to a lot of her sort of thoughts about leadership and how to interact with people. So her Dare to Lead is one that I have read a couple times.
Yeah.
Good to Great. I keep Good to Great. There's a Good to Great version that is for nonprofits. It's a little thinner version. I have referenced those multiple times. Another book, these are all business stuff. So another book called Traction, which is about have you read
I've read Traction.
The entrepreneurial operating system. I've definitely lifted up some of the thoughts there about how to really create processes within the organization to run the business. That's what comes to mind.
Okay.
In terms of
there's one in there that you mentioned, the one that you're reading now, the Simon Sinek book.
Yeah.
That's one that if I ask for book recommendations and the same book comes up more than 2 or 3 times over the course of conversations, I'll typically go buy it. And that's not the first time I've heard of that one. So that's good.
It's good. It's got enough story, it's narrative, and it's got his thoughts about it.
Yeah, he's a thoughtful guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got one more question and then you've got to hit the road.
Okay.
You, at some point, will decide to get off the ride, the professional ride. What are the hallmarks of that decision for you? When will you know it's the right time for me to pursue something else in retirement?
Are you talking specifically about retirement?
Yeah, what does retirement look like?
I don't know.
Or you just have a person that will never retire?
I don't think I'll ever really retire. I mean, I might possibly do all volunteer work, but I just cannot imagine not having that purpose of work. I would like probably to have that be less at some point, but I don't know. Like, I mean, I have a very full life right now with my kids. I have 3 kids and a big job, and I still sleep and I do the things I want to do mostly. So
why change it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ask me in 5 years.
Right. Yeah.
I still have a lot of energy for work.
Good. Well, yeah, the volunteering piece in what you do, you're probably scratching that same itch just by what you do professionally, where you don't feel the need to go.
I came really close to running for school board 2 years ago, which I think would have been absolutely insane now. But I spent like 4 months vetting it and talking to people and having people. That's something I probably would love to do, add in when my kids are launched.
Yeah.
You know, something like that. Not necessarily that again, but I think there's a lot of goodness in public service, and we need good public servants. Yeah. And so that might be something that I add in, but I don't think would be in place of a professional day job.
It's just when you have the time, when your kids are out of the house and you have free time.
Yeah, my husband was like,
things.
We already don't see you enough, and you're going to go do this other thing where you don't get paid. And he was like, anyway, that was sort of I was like, okay, I hear you.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for taking time for this. I realize this was a weird ask, but I really, really have thoroughly enjoyed catching up with you. So
same.
I'd love to do it again.
Same. Well, anytime, and I'm excited that you may be doing this with other people. I'll look forward to watching and hearing them.
Thank you. Yeah. And if you ever think of somebody that you would recommend to put in here in the chair, let me know.
We'll do.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Tanner.
All right.